So there's a thing with ADHD of it's not that you don't know what to do, it's doing what you know. ADHD, the world's not really built for that kind of brain, I don't think. It's the antithesis of that. But actually, I think when you walk into chaos, you're finally sort of seeing the world reflective of your own mind a little bit, and it's like, this feels like home.
Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to the Mindform podcast. My name is Frank Lawton. I'm a father, husband, and contemplator with a passion for ways of operating which better empower us to live wholeheartedly. The Mindform podcast is an extension of the Mindform platform and is similarly a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together. In each weekly episode, I'll spark a conversation to mine for gems of wisdom and collaborate on the game of architecting our minds. Most of our guests are members of the Mindform platform, and we're all big nerds for psychology, philosophy, and self-improvement. Today's guest is Trevor. Hey, Trevor.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. Yeah, I'm great. I'm great. So, a little bit about Trev. He's a father and a husband based in the UK. Who brings to Mindform a lot of enthusiasm and knowledge about ADHD, which we've just been talking about, self-management strategies, and techie tools for biofeedback, mind-body regulation, and other sorts of optimization. How are you? How are you feeling right now, Trevor?
Yeah, good. Tired. This is hour 18 awake. But yeah, no, I feel good. I think
Great.
like my brain kind of works differently when I'm tired. I think I get weirdly focused now, so I kind of
I can
feel
relate.
calm and focused, which is unusual for my mind state.
Yeah, no, that was in fact, I could say actually that there's two. Hi, Ariel. By the way, Ariel just waved in the chat. Yeah, we were just talking about the experience of ADHD and how having no choice because you've left everything into the last minute and you don't want to disappoint every single person is kind of our primary tool for getting really
Yeah,
focused for a
yeah,
extended period of time. And I found another way that I would pull that off was as when I was a student was staying up really late, like just being absolutely. I don't know why it was the case, but
yeah,
I could muck around all day until sort of 10 p.m. and then from 10:30 to 11 it's just me and and often what I'd have is I'd have some goofy distraction like some like internet game like Run or
yeah,
Tetris or whatever, and I would just like for like 4 hours it would just be me doing my essay, and then as soon as I felt a twinge of boredom I'd just play my game for like 3 minutes and then I go back to my essay and I'll just like
yeah,
like a
yeah.
robot for hours. That's another way I could get really focused, and I'd also get real goofy. It's like
Yeah,
an
I
altered
used
state
to.
of consciousness, low on sleep. It's kind of funny.
I think it is. I think it is. I think
It's
it's
a hell
just
of a drug.
your
Sorry,
brain
man.
is just completely inverse when you've got ADHD. I think I can drink an espresso now. It's 10 o'clock my time. I'll fall asleep no problem whatsoever. Like that, like caffeine most of the time has the complete opposite effect on me. It's a sedative almost. So it's
Yeah.
really weird how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of opposites. There's a lot of opposites. Because another thing that's unique to me, so we talked about, other people would get stressed about exams. They make me calm because
yeah,
I don't have to regulate myself. The whole exam is regulating me and I can just
yeah,
focus. But another example is just like any sort of the kind of situations that make everyone's heart rate go up generally make my heart rate go down. Like just anything that has like this sense of extreme novelty, urgency, genuine risk of everything falling apart. Like I just feel like, oh, finally, I know what to do, and
yeah.
I just do it. But other people are like, oh my gosh, what do I do? There's all these risks. Um,
Uh, th-
but yeah, it's
I,
like a relief for me to have that lack of options.
I think that's it. It's a lack of options. But I've been thinking about this as well. So I think you know the aspects of say work that in my work where I do well are the kind of problem solving,
Mm,
but kind of coming into chaos, like
yeah,
walking
yeah,
into chaos. I really enjoy those situations, and I get oddly calm in those situations. And I have been thinking about this recently about, you know, so stress for me comes in non-stressful situations, oddly, but stressful situations don't tend to stress me out that much. And I did, and I've always sort of, as I get older, I think, so why is that really? And I think it's almost like for the first time. So we've talked about this before, but it feels like the ADHD. The world's not really built for that kind of brain. I don't think. Certainly, kind of in a knowledge work type role, it's the antithesis of that. But actually, I think when you walk into chaos, you're finally sort of seeing the world reflective of your own mind a little bit, and it's like, this feels like home. This is kind of like
Chaos.
the outward projection of my
Yeah.
brain. I'm comfortable here, that kind of thing. And it's kind of the same sort of thing as we were talking just before we went live, which was, kind of creating these false deadlines and these false urgencies just to try and get your brain to kind of jolt into action. It's just it's a bit cruel at times, but I think once you become comfortable with where you thrive, I definitely think you can carve out niches for yourself where this type of brain can thrive and can potentially kind of be mitigated against some of the stresses. Like the mundane is the thing that's stressful for me. The kind of the
Same.
procrastination is the thing that stresses me.
Oh yeah, having a relatively free day, but a few things that I need to
Yeah,
get done. That's an emotional roller coaster. That's just turmoil. It's what am I
yeah,
gonna do? It's really interesting. I just want there's a lot of different ways of understanding ADHD, right? You can understand it as a biochemical error, or a genetic sort of disorder. You can understand it as uh, a personality type, maybe taken to the extreme. You can understand it as a trauma response. Like there's a lot of different ways you can understand. I sort of lean to the trauma response in
yeah.
combination with personality distribution, like disposition. That's kind of my leaning. But just when we're talking now, I'm thinking, well, in the same way people have talked about with schizophrenia, or at least schizotypal kind of disorders, they're in sort of pre-modern human society, you could say, prehistoric rather. There's there's these distributions of people's degree of schizophrenic kind of traits, and those who are far that way, they're the mystics, they're the, or rather the whatever the word is, the, what's the word? Yeah, but the person in the tribe who does the chemicals, and the shamans,
Shaman, yeah, yeah,
the shaman,
nice.
and yeah, and then and then there's also like when you're saying, oh, for me, when I thrive is stepping into the chaos, and I've just been doing a lot of reading and thinking about the hero's journey, and that is the hero's journey. Is the idea of stepping out of order into chaos,
Yeah.
and making sense of that chaos, and then bringing something back. Right, that's
Oh,
sort of
if you
an
insist that I'm a
archetypal.
hero, Frank, I mean, I would
Yeah,
never say
that's
that.
what
But if
exactly
you
what I was thinking. I was thinking
insist,
you're a hero. Wow, I've met a real life hero. Um, yeah, yeah. Like, is there? I mean, there's definitely an argument for. I think it's got to be true to some degree, right? There's huge diagnosis of ADHD, especially in boys, especially in early schooling. Like, there's clearly a maladaptation going on
mm,
there, where it's like, this is there really something wrong with this kid, or does he just need to go for a run outside and climb a tree? Like, leave him alone. Um, but yeah, but at the same time, well, yeah, you get it. Maybe it's like, maybe it's a special trait that's for people who, like, there's the people who keep the order, and there's the people who enforce the order, and there's the people who take those risks, and jump out there and thrive in that space.
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think again, I've been thinking about this fairly recently as well. If I was presented with a pill to make me neurotypical, would I take it?
Ooh,
And I
good
and I
question.
don't know, if I'm honest, because so there is there's a lot of it that I just that is the source of a lot of pain in life, and actually the biggest source of pain I think sometimes for me is how it affects my wife, my family and things like that, and actually I'm quite sort of hyper vigilant at the moment, trying to look for signs in my son, like, because it is very, very sort of, it's prone to be passed on hereditary. So, but there's, even with that, there's I just don't know who I would be now if I took that pill and I didn't have these traits and I didn't have that struggle. I think I would find the evaporation of that struggle more terrifying than having these struggles for the rest of my life. And again, it comes back to some of the interest in some of the new techniques. So I'm not medicated at the moment. I'm still on the referral waiting list. But some of these other techniques potentially to kind of mitigate some of the symptoms. And I think it is that, but it feels like it would be almost having a different costume that you could wear in different parts of life, but then ultimately being able to, not changing who I am at the core, and being able to kind of take that costume on and off, because there are parts of life where it is just very inconvenient to be very distractible and very forgetful and away with the fairies, you know. But there are other times when the other side of it, which is the kind of the obsessive hyper focus, the ability to kind of maybe think a little bit more creatively, be quite calm in stressful situations, is actually really useful. And it's kind of being able to flirt between those two. I think the trouble with ADHD sometimes is you can't. There's no button to flick those modes, and sometimes I'm
Yeah.
away with the fairies when I need to be laser focused, and vice versa. So it can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way that's the universal, regardless of who you are, psychotextual dream, right? Of like, oh,
Yeah,
I wish I could adopt and remove traits
yeah,
and skills and tendencies and capacities
yeah,
like that to adapt to the situation. But you say if there was a pill, I believe there's amphetamines, and you say you're on the waiting list there. They're not, they don't. If you stop taking them, you still have ADHD, so they're not a cure, so to speak.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean that's really interesting because this just gets
Would
me
you take
thinking.
it?
Well, what
Do you
are
think you
you?
would take it?
Well, no, I wouldn't. If there was a pill, I take a pill one off, and then I'm like, would it? One reason I wouldn't take it is because I have no idea what that even means. I have no idea what it means to no longer
Exactly,
have ADHD.
exactly.
Like,
Who is that
it's
person? Who is that
yeah,
person? The other side of
exactly,
that pill? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
There's no teasing that apart, and I think even the idea of that pill, I think it's in principle impossible um because it comes from this really poor model, low res model of neurodiversity, which is,
Yeah,
oh, you're a normal person, and then you like have the disease, or you have the
yeah,
disorder, and it's not like that. You're this whole holistic system that's operating. The whole system throughout and within, and
yeah.
every part that's interconnected is operating in a different way. So yeah, I think you couldn't separate the ADHD from the person. But in saying that, I'm optimistic. Yeah, I use that word. I'm optimistic that for ADHD, there is, through sort of, again, I kind of have a trauma response understanding of what ADHD is. So I think through trauma work and healing,
Mm,
through adoption of certain strategies, it's not an immediate thing, but I think it can be a transformational change in the sense that it can be done, and
mm,
then you're sort of on the other side, and not so much that you're no longer a bit hyperactive. You're no longer I'm sure it'll still exist to some degree because it's become so built into the structure
yeah,
of your brain at this point,
yeah,
like the pathways for dopamine and all of that. But that you can really develop some skills and make some adjustments. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing at all. I
no,
think it's serious deep work. But like that, and then on the other side of that, people, if you tell them, oh, I'm ADHD, they might be like, really? Uh, which
yeah,
has started to be my experience sometimes, but when I pick up too many responsibilities, the ADHD just comes back because I
yeah,
kind of lose track. But yeah. So I guess I would challenge you. Like, I don't think the pill even in theory is possible, but
No.
there are things that can be done, right, to mitigate the symptomatology, and it seems like they're all things really that you or I would both choose to do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but taking amphetamines like Ritalin or whatever for, I'm assuming, I think that's an amphetamine, yeah,
Yeah.
for special occasions or whatever,
Yeah.
or for crap, I really got to study it over the next 3 days, whatever it is, and then doing this deep work, developing strategies like those things, acknowledging that you can't tease apart the ADHD and the person, that those are the options we have, and we're taking them.
Yeah. I think it's building scaffolding, really. I know that the kind of that's the way I sort of see it around. I've got to build scaffolding around certain parts of the way that my decision
Mm.
making happens, the way that I, the way that I tackle sort of certain aspects of life. I just have to build this scaffolding. So the avocado is an attempt to do that, which is a way to try and make the mundane a little bit more interesting. I mean, I think that's the thing for me. So it's, it sounds very simplistic, but it kind of works. Is that, I've tried everything. I've just got to find a way to find interest in something. And I've got to kind of rate tasks and workload on that kind of interest scale. And then and then I've got, a color code for kind of things that I just find like horrifically uninteresting. And I've just got techniques to try and, again, jolt myself into it. So things like body doubling, working in a different, office, doing it in a coffee shop, rewards, certain nootropics, caffeine, just anything. But again, it's using a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. So like, the temptation is to kind of just get your brain away from working in this way all the time, and that's not and that's not the game for me. And I've learned that going as I've got older. That's not the
Mm.
game. The
Okay.
game isn't to constantly fight with your brain and constantly try and maneuver it, because it will just resist. It's like Kevlar. The harder you hit it, the more it will stiffen. You've got to kind of treat it like a scalpel, and kind of relax your brain into these certain so and I've found, the brain is really kind of, it's susceptible and it's pliable to these kinds of things. So if you put on a certain, right, I'm listening to music and I'm sat in this particular seat and I've just had my coffee. Oh, now we're going to do some boring tasks, but but okay, I'm kind of with you on that, and you can play with your brain a little bit to that regard. But then for me, I've got to let it go back into its natural state, and that's where the scaffolding's got to come in. So I've got to, when my brain wants to go back into its natural kind of distractible, unfocused, idle state, I've just got to make sure that I'm not kind of damaging parts of my life where I'm allowing that to happen.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it's. I think this is kind of why I'm exhausted all the time, because my brain is just constantly thinking about this. I'm constantly kind of
Yeah, it's almost
maneuver.
masking, right? It's like the
Yeah,
way that neurodivergents talk about masking, like there's automatic functioning, and there's this whole cognitively taxing prefrontal cortex
yeah,
task that's going on at baseline across the board of trying to regulate yourself, trying to motivate yourself, trying to push yourself, trying to steer yourself, like, and for whatever reason those are more difficult in certain contexts for people with ADHD diagnosis. And so yeah,
mm.
you got to put in, and it can be really really exhausting. And when you were talking about scaffolding and you mentioned the avocado system, just
Oh yeah.
actually let's just give a little bit of context for the avocado system. Yeah,
So
run through that
it's
real fast.
okay. So it's areas of, so it's an obviously an acronym. So it's areas of focus. So that would
Yeah.
be kind of the
A.
domains of your
Yeah.
life. So for me, that would be husband, worker, father, brother, son. V is virtues. So taking inspiration from Become Who You Are, Ryan. the sort of the signature strengths, if you want to use that term, the
Oh
characteristic
yeah.
virtues. What am I working on? O is so it's organize. So this is kind of key, which is kind of taking all of those things and organizing. C, uh, C is capture. So
Oh yes.
this is just trying to sweep all of those. Well, to me, this is minimizing capture points. Like the more capture points I have. So, I mean, if you want to take a kind of work method, this is your email inbox,
Oh okay.
your
Now I understand what you're saying.
your post-it.
So
The
it's like
places where
task.
you're,
It's
yeah, where you're
things
going to
where
receive
yeah, okay.
inputs, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Where you can
Yeah,
hold information about what needs to get done, so you don't have to hold it in here. Is that sort of what
yeah,
you mean?
basically,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, and then you've got A, which the other A, which is appraise, or so arrange or appraise. So that's taking all of those inputs and then spending. I like to sort of try and work in two modes. It's a kind of well-known system, like the worker mode and the boss mode, and I'll come back to
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
actually
We've
because
talked
I've
about that.
found
Yeah. Yeah.
there's something that I found recently that I quite like that seems to work quite well, which sort of fits into that as well. So that would be being in sort of boss mode, if you like, which is arranging these tasks, making worker mode, making worker's life as easy as possible. So clear descriptions, clear outputs.
Right, and
Um,
that's all the scaffolding you've talked about around like, having all these like setting up all of the like to get into worker mode, all of these sort of cues
yeah,
and triggers that it's focus
yeah,
time, or setting up um, body doubling or something, so that the
yeah,
worker mode's only thing to
exactly
think
right.
about is the work. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like, yeah, exactly. So exactly right. So the interest matrix. Like if I know that I've got a batch of uninteresting stuff that just has to get done, I can see that coming and I'm ready to prepare for it, and I can put all those things in place. D would be do, or delegate, or anything that involves kind of just sit down and do the thing, you know. Um, and then
Mm-hmm.
O is like Oracle, so that is that. I think I made the joke that it could have been archived, but nobody's heard of an avocado, so it's an avocado. So that would just be like collecting things that I like to keep hold of, like sort of wins and my filing systems and all of that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, it works. It works all right. I think I have to kind of keep interest in it. I get bored
Yeah,
of
so
it.
I've got that badly written
Yeah.
there.
Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah. When you were first talking about scaffolding, I was imagining like that being really, really mentally exhausting. Like the
yeah.
different, that metaphor of, okay, so I'm this building and I operate the way I operate, and because there's limitations there, I need to build up this scaffolding.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, but and maybe we can come back to this question, but like, okay, what about changing at the foundation, right? Because then you don't have to constantly be doing more and be doing extra and be
Yeah.
supplementing, which is really cognitively taxing. But I think at the same time, it sounds like this really, really structured kind of scaffolding that you use is actually, it is an effort reduction thing, because if you don't have scaffolding and you're just wishing or trying to change yourself, but you don't have the tools to do that, then you're climbing around on the outside of the building and you're reaching and
Exactly.
you're, all this
Exactly.
stuff. The scaffolding is systems that mean, okay, I can externalize, I can
Yeah.
contain these moments and these skills that like these demands to be more than is easy or natural for me. I can contain that, so
Yeah.
that within that and outside of that, there's some level of not having to be on all the time. Because if you don't, I mean, I have the experience of, if you don't have these systems, you're just constantly trying to no avail, right?
Yeah. You just, yeah, exactly. And the scaffolding itself can then become a bit of a signal to the brain for me, you know. So when I talk about scaffolding, what am I sort of trying to prevent? Well, so there are times when I can just, I just need to zone out. I just need to not be interested in anything other than my own internal state or staring at a Netflix program. I don't really want to do that if I'm talking to my son, because then I'm signaling to him that you know yeah, I'm not interested, or that my world is more important than what he's trying. So the scaffolding I try and build is to kind of erect it at points where I'm and it comes back to this point about kind of matching parts of my life with parts of the systems that need to be in place. And when, I never want my son to think my phone is more important than him, or but there are times in the day when I need to just mindlessly scroll on the phone, because that is my default state, unfortunately, with sometimes with this. But I never ever want to I try not to do that with
I
him.
promise you, Trev, your default state, your innate nature is not scrolling on a phone. I
Yeah,
promise
no,
you.
fair,
I
yeah,
promise you
fair
were
enough.
made for more than this,
Yeah,
Trevor.
yeah. But so, similarly, when I need to be on it at work, I need scaffold, and it's never ever going to be like this. And it's what attracted me really to psychotecture, because I think me and you have talked about this before. I think when you've got some neurodivergence, there's a part of you that's forever building and tearing down and rebuilding your brain, I think. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
just
you
never
learn.
had a
You
name
learn.
for it.
I have to reflect on and adjust who I
Yeah,
am a little bit, because it just seems like, yeah, there's that sense of mismatch, and so you become
yeah,
aware of what's different, and then you want to, yeah.
yeah,
I agree. I think having that kind of difference can totally be.
yeah.
I don't
But
know if
you've
it
probably,
always is, but
I
it's a
mean, I've
trigger.
got
Yeah,
friends
yeah.
that, I've got friends, and you've probably got friends. I've got friends that have just daydreamed through life, and they don't ever really kind of they never there's no criticism at all. I think in a way I think it's quite beautiful, but
It's enviable.
you, they've just never, when you speak to them, they've never really kind of examined their own kind of internal mind state beyond quite sort of like primary colors when it comes to emotions. They've not really, and because they never really needed to, like the kind of the world is sort of built for them a little bit. Like they've never really needed to kind of maybe dip their toe in, but they never had, but whereas that, when I discovered sort of psychotecture, designing the mind and everything, it suddenly was kind of, it was putting post-it notes on things that I'd already thought, done in some way, obviously not to that level, but it was suddenly putting real kind of like deep thought, really kind of clear, techniques. And suddenly you think, oh God, like there's this, someone's done this real thinking of this thing that I've just grappled with my entire life. I think that's what attracted me to it. And actually, that then just snowballs now. Like it's just my permanent interest. And again, kind of
Same.
deploying scaffolding, putting brains in certain states, kind of all of these techniques. Like I think Ryan would say, like kind of uploading the software I'm just obsessed with it now. Like I genuinely, I'm just obsessed with it. But I think I've said this before. For me, one of the key parts is kind of having these pause points where I've got time to upload that, to erect the scaffolding, or to upload the right software and everything like that. And particularly when it comes to emotional reactivity, which is something that I do suffer with, kind of or emotional dysregulation, particularly.
Is this?
Um,
I are you talking right now about and I can elaborate, or maybe you can a little bit on it, but this idea of the psychological moat, is that what you're?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, can you
exactly, yeah,
elaborate on that? Because yeah, you said to me like kind of a psychotextual ambition of yours is this idea of building a moat around your mind,
yeah,
which is kind of this gap, this distance between
yeah,
your inner world and the things your experience or what you encounter.
it, yeah, because it. So the idea with the moat is that with the drawbridge, I can pull the drawbridge up, but crucially, there's only one way across the moat, and it's not just
Right.
coming at
Okay.
me from all angles. But I guess I love it. I do kind of enjoy you know sort of a visualization of this kind of stuff. But for me, the, so there's a thing with ADHD of it's not that you don't know what to do; it's doing what you know. So I
Oh,
know.
absolutely.
I think I nicked that from Russell Barkley, actually. So he's a prominent, and that is
That's
absolutely
okay.
true. So when we're discussing psychotecture, I love all of the kind of the techniques that we're looking at and that we discuss sort of regular on on the Mindform, Paul. But for me, if I don't have a moat, and I don't have time, and I don't have that space to kind of, put the right software in place or give myself that time. Not that it becomes futile, because I think it would still the genesis of it still would occur. But I think the biggest part for me is this idea of the moat, which is to to pause before I react, before
Yeah,
I decide, to stop and think and take yourself out of the situation. Sometimes I think the other thing is I think we all do, but get lost in thought and become a slave to the emotion. And it's so I like the idea of the moat, or the kind of the blink, the kind of the emotional blink. Just have a little stop.
yeah,
Right, what am I
yeah,
doing?
yeah. The psychotext's solace as could be
Beautiful. Yeah,
one of
yeah,
the
perfect. Yeah,
psychotechnologies as
yeah,
Ryan's
yeah,
crafted. That's a good
yeah.
language to describe it. Yeah, I mean, I got a few questions about your moat.
Got him.
One is just to help visualize. Like, could you think of maybe like a character from like film or TV that models that to you? That's like someone that you would that demonstrates this sort of psychotextual attributes that you aspire to. Um,
I mean, the Tasmanian devil comes to mind. To be perfectly honest, the
how's that?
yeah, the hurricane that just bounces off everything and just, you know, the way I see it, honestly, is like, is kind of the classic knights attacking the castle, but and I've
Mm.
got but I can stop them for a period of time. I can
While you
protect the
while
castle a
you
little.
organize your army or
Yeah,
build
while
your
I'm like
catapult or
firing off,
whatever.
and deciding what strategy I want to kind of deploy. Otherwise, you just kind of, it's this idea of overwhelm. I think, like,
Yeah.
what's the physical thing that stops overwhelm? In my head, it was a moat protecting the castle a little bit. That's just the way
Yeah,
that
fair
it kind
enough.
of went.
Fair enough. That
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's yeah. Overwhelm. The word overwhelm is not just used to describe emotions. It is could be used to describe a fort getting raided by
yeah,
from all angles. It is
yeah,
overwhelmed.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question about your moat is what. How are you approaching that goal? Like, what is there kind of even a more specific skill that you're training yourself in, or there are some tools that you find like when you utilize them, they approximate giving you the moat? Because you're talking about a live thing, right? You're talking about like, I want to kind of at all times have this force field a little bit
Yeah,
where there's just always maybe a little bit of a pause before I
yeah,
respond, and it's almost removing that impulsive, spontaneous
yeah.
reaction. Is that okay? Yeah. So if that's what it
It
is,
depends
then
on the situation,
how are
really.
you doing that? Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's difficult, particularly when it's so let's take an example of, let's take, I'm irritated about something, you know, and every cell in my body wants to react. Like, it's just such a and and for whatever reason, the part of you that can kind of, the slow thinking versus the fast thinking brain, the emotional reactivity is in the fast thinking brain, and the slow thinking brain just doesn't have time to kind of go, you're not going to feel this way in 5 minutes, don't do what you
Mm-hmm.
want to do, not violence or anything like that, but kind of,
I understand.
overreact, or whatever. I mean, the first thing is that what I've been trying to do is recognize the feeling first. So just kind of label the emotion. That kind of works a little bit well. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, in meditation they call it noting, don't they? So,
Yeah.
right, I'm feeling angry.
Agreed.
So, like, or I'm feeling irritated. I think one thing I'm trying to do as well is be much more kind of nuanced about the emotion that I'm feeling. It's not anger, like, so anger's too broad a brush. It's, I'm frustrated, or I'm irritated, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm
There's a
feeling
great yeah.
defensive, you know.
Yeah, I one thing that I've encountered through my interest in nonviolent communication is he has this like emotions inventory, because part of the process is, I mean, I see this as facilitating what you're describing through language of like, okay, instead of reacting, you are this, right, or this is
Yeah,
what's going on, it's taking a time to get in touch with what's going on internally and labeling that and expressing that. And he has this list of emotions because
Yeah,
the first step is when this happens, when what I'm observing, and the second step is I feel, and it's like I feel rejected. That's not a feeling, or
exactly. Yeah,
I feel bad or I feel good. That's a bit low resolution. Like,
yeah,
be specific. Yeah, I feel frustrated. I feel irked. I feel unsettled. I feel
exactly.
restless. I feel outraged.
Yeah,
I feel disgusted. These are all things that you could maybe mean when you're saying angry. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And just by doing that is the first part of the moat. So if I'm having to stop to think, well, what am I feeling? That's that's half a breath, which sometimes is all that it needs. I think
So
the
is it
other,
just time? Is the moat
I
made
think
of
so.
time, or is it made? Because I'm also hearing the two things that you're saying come in that moment are time and awareness, right? So there's like, okay, so I have those few seconds, but it's also like that gap is created by you seeing the emotion rather than
Yeah,
being. So
and let the
time and
slow
awareness, right?
time and
Yeah,
awareness, and I think also it's the slow thinking versus the fast thinking brain. You've got to
yeah.
give. So I
And how do you
genuinely
make that
think that.
switch? Yeah.
So I
Go
think
on. Sorry.
I think in the moment the fast thinking brain is the one that kind of is the powerful. It's the dominant force. But I think overall, your more strategic, your slower thinking brain, your kind of more rational brain is ultimately the kind of, the one that wins out overall. But you've got the moat is kind of designed to let the slow thinking part of the brain activate in the moment is a superpower. I think for me anyway, like that is kind of the
Oh,
ultimate goal.
absolutely.
But I think, I mean,
Does
I
sound like a
haven't tried this
superpower.
yet, but I think the other thing that I want to do is is have an honest conversation with my wife and have, I don't know whether I've not really thought it through properly yet, but whether it's kind of buzzwords or like some sort of code where something external to me that's in a non-confrontational way, particularly if I'm feeling
It's hard to pull that
emotional.
off, but yeah,
Yeah,
in
like,
principle possible.
yeah, almost like a trigger word that's external to me, that is kind of, that we've pre-agreed, that somehow will short circuit. Whether that works or not, I don't know, but I would like to try it, because then I also think then it's kind of it then facilitates a nice kind of honest conversation with a loved
Mm.
one, that like she can see those signs potentially that I'm overreacting, or that I'm irritated or whatever, and then it's not, but it's done so, again, taking nonviolent communication as a kind of inspiration here. It's kind of done in this way that's from a gentle place, from a loving place. It's not, you're not
Yeah,
engaging
I
with the
see you're
material.
struggling with this. This is
I'm
a way
saying
that
this
I have
word
of
because I
supporting you.
think you're irritated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's a way of saying I see you, almost, that like I'm not, so I'd like to try that one. The one coming back to the worker versus boss mode, the thing that I've been finding is working quite well for me at the moment is this idea of future me, and
Mm.
it's surprisingly powerful, actually. So,
Okay.
let's take a kind of low rent example of it. When I came in today, I just dumped my keys on the floor because I was rushing to kind of like to get set up for this, and and it's working quite well. Future me will then be struggling to find my keys tomorrow morning. And so I have this little thing of like, well, future me would quite like you to put the keys back where the keys always go, please. And that's been working quite well, actually. That like this idea of like being kind, not necessarily being kind to myself now, but being kind to myself tomorrow. I'm
Yeah,
actually
almost
finding works really well.
in a way, I can imagine that working partly because it feels less like work and maybe more like compassion or generosity,
Yeah,
which is innately rewarding. And then you also, I mean, do you think that this is developing some momentum? Because I imagine it would if, you have sort of a repeated experience of them being like, I past me had this thought about future me, and here I
high
am
five
benefiting
past
from
me.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And so
Come
it's
on,
in the
you
it's in
too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like high five. Well done, me. Like give yourself a little high five. It is a it was something that was in Your Brain Is Not Broken, which was a book that um, me and Brandy have been sort of reading together.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and yeah, it's this idea of, well, she does it the other way, so she high fives her past self. For me, it's more thinking of my future self has been working quite well.
Well,
Um,
those things are not. Those things go. They're the same thing, right? They support each other. They don't. They're not
exactly, you can do
alternatives. Yeah.
both. I think, but coming back to the idea of the moat is that, you know, is that this, I think, as I mentioned to sort of mentioned earlier before, is trying to kind of let yourself know, particularly, that you're not going to feel this way in 10 minutes or tomorrow, or you may, or even worse, you may well regret reacting to this. And again, it's this kind of like, save your future self the
Mm.
pain of guilt or shame, or kind of like, ruminating on something that ultimately isn't worth it. Again, I haven't fully put that into force yet, but that kind of works. But then the future, being I mean, you probably know this. With ADHD, again, one of the big issues is the issues with self-esteem, the way you beat yourself up, the way you just the way that you speak to yourself at times is horrific. But so again, future me is kind of a way of bringing into a bit more kindness to yourself, because it's ultimately, it's you, but it's not necessarily you right now. It's you in the future, and I'm finding it quite easy to be compassionate to myself, not necessarily now, but tomorrow. And that, I don't know why, but that seems to work for me quite well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have this personal conviction, sort of as a universal principle, that compassion, other focus, love is just like, it's just completely transfiguring, and it kind of
Mm.
none of those negative things can coexist with it. Like when you're feeling
No.
outward warmth, everything else kind of dissolves to
Yeah.
that. So, if that's something that you're able to trigger, I can really see that being
Yeah.
not just like, oh, great, I can kind of use this emotion to motivate myself, but like I can change my whole state right now, right? From
Yeah.
a state of, oh, like I'm angry, I'm frustrated, or I'm rushed, or I'm confused, or whatever it is, where that's gonna lead you to
Yeah.
mistreat your future self. When you feel warmth, when you feel compassion for your future self, then not only do you act differently, but those feelings can't coexist with that
Yeah.
compassion. And now it's like, oh, I'm not the person who I'm mad at right now, or who whatever. I'm the person who's full of love.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
again, coming back to the whole thing that, you need this kind of ADHD needs this reward. Well,
that's
the
a reward.
reward is being nice to yourself, to not having to look for your keys tomorrow morning,
Mm,
or the
mm.
reward is walking in and the kitchen pots have all been put away and you've tidied it, and you didn't want to do it last night, and but again, like, your high five, that's yeah, it is it is working well. And then again, the key just becomes about, what techniques are we, once you've kind of established that gap, established that pause, and kind of maybe been able to kind of to pull the circuit breaker out, then it becomes about the growth mindset, the kind of, what do I want to kind of, ultimately, how do I want the operating system to go from here. And that's where, on Mindform, we've discussed, there's so many things that are just so useful, books that we've read, and the Ryan's sort of, Ryan's psychotectures that can that are so useful in that situation. But for me, I just figured out fairly quickly that, it's kind of like putting a seed in a plant pot with no soil. If I just react all the time and don't find a way to pause, I, that seed just would never ever grow.
Right. Oh,
Um,
absolutely, and that's key, right? Because I'm talking about these two sort of like meta approaches, these meta tools that that what you're working on is built on, right? There's mindfulness, there's that awareness and that time, and there's the tools, right? There's the specific tools, the specific strategies. Kind of, you can maybe say like CBT type stuff or thought triggers. Like, okay, when this particular thing goes on externally or internally, this is the particular thing I would like to bring to
yeah,
that situation. So there's that, and then there's having the awareness to bring that in the first place on each
yeah,
occasion.
yeah.
Where was I going with this? Where was I going with this? Well, I guess yeah. My question is like, it seems like you're really great on that tools side. Do you have are you working to develop that awareness, or do you find that being quite, I guess, proactive, reflective, yada yada about the tools actually does support that awareness over time?
It, it, it does support it definitely, but I think the awareness first and foremost has to take precedence, I think, and it is,
Mm.
to be honest, it is a kind of skill that needs to be worked on in itself, because it's like I, I just seem to feel, those emotions quite intensely, and they
Mm-hmm.
tend to kind of they override everything. They override reason, logic. I mean, they're kind of. I mean, we know this. They're designed to do that, but for me in particular, you know, I quite what is it? Systems beats willpower every day of the week. So if I have systems and I have models that I can deploy, I'm kind of I'm breaking the friction, or sort of I'm breaking down the friction of just being emotive and just reacting and not having a kind of go to. So I kind of have to, you kind of have to work on both together, but you kind of have to do it quickly. Um, but sometimes it's good to put this in other people, I think, like, or sort of,
Mm.
we're not alone in this. Like, we've got families and things like that. Kind of, I don't think this should be secret. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of either, really. And I think most people are very receptive to, oh, you know, I suffer from this emotional dysregulation. Like, I don't mean it. Like, but when I get irritated, these are the things that I feel. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me when you
Mm.
detect this? Like, I mean, I know my wife's like really like supportive with that kind of stuff, and
That's
you
awesome.
know, it but yeah, it is just sometimes it feels like it's the first time you've ever had to deal with it, even if you've tried to do it 100 times, because it can be quite um, yeah, overwhelming. It can, yeah, you can just get overwhelmed with it. Um, but we see,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Just with that, lol. I mean, we're not at the end yet, but we're approaching the end of the call, and I just want to say, because we've got a few people in the chat, and I just saw
Oh
your
God,
message,
yeah.
John. Sorry about my mic volume being a bit too low. So I'm a bit closer now. Um, but if you guys have any questions or thoughts, now's a great time to chuck them in, and maybe I'll get a chance to ask Trev about that before the end of the call. Um, but yeah, I this kind of this the center of compassion, like you're talking about that the importance of that awareness with your wife, and then there's the importance of that awareness, like that compassion for yourself when you have that tool of like future self thing, um, and then there's even the awareness, like naming my own emotions. Even that to me is like a shift toward compassion. The reason that's coming up for me, that I'm kind of noticing that pattern, is for me that's been like the biggest, most profound healing shift for me with my ADHD, like really changing my whole relationship with it. Is you were referencing before, or if um, whoever, I think you were quoting someone, the way we talk to ourselves, or someone talk to you like that, you would not hang out with them
Yeah,
anymore. I see that personally. That's not my experience. Like, but it used to be. But I've really, in a tools approach, right? Like, I noticed the particular way I talk about myself. I don't like it.
yeah,
I'm gonna make that shift. I'm gonna make that shift. Um, have really changed the sort of communication style I have with myself. So like a few days ago, I was really really frustrated. I had a few things I needed to work on, and I kind of threw away my evenings. It was too overwhelming, just kind of distracting stuff, and then it was really late, and I had something on the next day I wasn't prepared for, yada yada. And I was feeling really really frustrated with myself, but there were no words. It was just, oh, I'm feeling so frustrated. I'm
Yeah.
feeling so this, I'm feeling so that, and that kind of changing the way we communicate to be less violent in that way, to me, is really transformational, because it makes the new we're talking about like building new automatics with these tools, and it
Mm.
makes the new automatic me turning around and looking at myself, what's going on in me, right? So like it's like making my very feel like that compassion, whether it's through you have a compassionate relationship, or you're
Yeah.
treating yourself compassionately, or you have the compassionate feeling, it makes the reaction to what's going on in you awareness, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
compassion is. It's reacting to something with curiosity and awareness and
Yeah.
sensitivity. And so like
I-
that's been really huge for me, is because now I'm not punching myself into, or shoving myself into getting things
exactly,
done.
and
I'm just
that's
seeing
that.
what's going on. Yeah.
That's the good. I mean, that's great, and that's the goal, isn't it? So the goal. So you've worked on it, and the goal is that now has just become completely automatic. And I think that needs. That's where I want to get to ultimately. That I'm not that this is just something that's automatically installed. You know, subconsciously almost. And it becomes your kind of default network. It becomes your default reaction to those kinds of things, and but at the moment it is kind of like it's a manual process, unfortunately, for the time being. But yeah, yeah, that's great. The goal has to be that the awareness just swings back to the automatic is to be kind to yourself ultimately, and to
Mm,
be,
mm.
because I think I don't know I don't know about you, but I can sort of tell when people are kind to themselves. Not love themselves, that's different, and not be overconfident, that's different, and not be arrogant, that's different. But I
Just
can tell
warm,
when,
right? Warm towards
yeah, I can
themselves,
tell when
maybe.
people are kind to themselves, because it's a different tone, I think. Is There's one person in particular that springs to mind, and I don't even really know him that well, but the interactions I have, he's just so. It's really hard to describe, but kind. I
It's
always come
really hard
away
to
just thinking.
describe.
I really come away
Yeah.
just thinking he just seems like a really kind person, but it's but and again, we wouldn't say this, but it's not weakness. He's not weak. He's not like a pushover. He's not meek. He's not kind of like shy. It's not that, but he's very kind. And I always think, like, I always come away from these interactions just thinking, I bet he is. I bet you can almost tell the way that he speaks to himself, because it projects out of him.
Mm,
And then you
lovely.
also watch, whenever you see people like that, there's a certain level of charisma, I think, that comes with kindness. I think kindness is the new frontier. I think kindness is something that we kind of know, but I don't think kindness has been fully explored yet, certainly in like a working environment. Like, in sort of the typical sort of like modern day office, it's fantastic now. Obviously, there's like neurodivergent forums, and their mental health is completely, everyone's aware of it, and there's well-being and stuff like that. But I think kindness is kind of, I think that's the last frontier, I think, that we need to kind of get over, because I don't
Yeah,
think it's utilized enough.
I certainly hope so too, and I do see threads. Like I see threads that are an indication of that happening. But man, that's really cool. Really interesting to hear you say that. I mean, I have a take about that as well. Like I think kindness is the frontier. Like I think
Yeah.
kindness is the final frontier. Like all of these, like just kind of how I was saying before, like kindness is not just one mode of operating, it's transformational. Like
Yeah.
all like anger, all of these destructive modes of operating, they can't coexist with kindness. And
Mm.
kindness brings awareness into situations, and sensitivity that allows you to see what's really going on and work with what's
Yeah.
really going on. You're not forced, like when it's kindness, you're not forcing, you're not making things happen, you're working with, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's completely transformational. And yeah, I look at the world sometimes and I go, oh, it's really cool, the new ways that kindness is, these threads that look like the battle of that frontier. But then at the same time, there's polarization, and there's kids like in high school fighting more because of the gossip on TikTok or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, so yeah, so it's like a maybe I just sounded like a super out of touch
But
boomer just then. I don't know what apps they gossip on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not a
I mean,
boomer. I'm like
but
a Gen X, but go on. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also it's kind of naturally two way as well. Like to so you coming back to the kind of whole the sort of self virtue, the key to eudaimonia and well being, eudaimonia, I should say. Um, Kindness is kind of it's built into that. It obviously to be kind is to kind of
It's
project
virtue.
out
Yeah.
goodness, but also it's like a mirror. It comes right back at you, and it doesn't have these problems. Not problems, but it doesn't have these kind of um, these things that it grapples with, like altruism, for example, or like, is there such a thing as a truly selfless act? Because if a selfless act makes you feel good, then is it selfless? Like kindness just doesn't have any of these kind of philosophical issues. It's just
It's just
kindness.
warmth towards others. It's just
Yeah, it
warm,
it
lovey-dovey
doesn't
feelings for other people and
exactly
acting
like
those out. Yeah.
it's like I mean I genuinely, and I've said it, like I've said this since he was born. I will support my, within reason, but I'll support. I don't want to project anything onto my child at all. He can be whatever he wants, but kindness, like I want him to be kind. Like that's
Yeah.
the only thing I want for him. And I think, and I've said this as well, that if he's kind, his whole world changes. Like
Oh yeah.
teachers are human beings at the end of the day. They're very patient and everything, but ultimately at
Yeah, I
the
know.
end of
I'm
the day,
married
they
to
are
one.
human
Yeah.
beings. And
Yeah.
if he's seen as kind by the people in his life, like his teachers and his friendship group and everything, like his whole world, it
Oh, it's completely
transformed his
different. It's
entire
completely
world.
different. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
It's the core. I mean, it's the best. Yeah, I this idea like kind of. I think the best thing, just to also try to reconcile that altruism contradiction. The best thing you can do for others and the best thing you can do for yourself, it's the same thing, and
exactly.
it's be the best kind of person you can be, right? And
Yeah,
um, yeah, fill out those virtues. And I do think love is like love, kindness is like the main one. But that's yeah, man, we're really on the same page because I have the same sentiment at least. I mean, who knows how it's going, but about my son is like, oh, I don't really have any concern what kind of thing he likes to do for fun or what kind of job he ends up wanting to do.
no,
If he's kind, as long as he's kind, that's it. That's like everything
yeah,
else can be whatever it is. I mean, how can you feel bad about someone's life and who they are if they're living those values? I mean, in terms of maybe things going wrong for his life, I'll be there to help him navigate that. But
yeah.
other people will
Right.
be too if he's kind.
I,
But kindness
exactly,
wins.
and I mean, it makes him. It's there's the kind of moralistic argument. I would also
Cheers,
argue.
John.
Thanks, John. It's a good development. Developmentally, it's good to be kind because it you know the relationship he'll then develop, or they'll then develop within their friendship group, and the way that they kind of like navigate the world with their friendship group will be good for their development. They won't be the kid that's ostracized because they don't play fairly, or they cheat whenever they play too rough, or they cheat whenever they play at a game, or they won't be, they won't be spoken to
Yeah.
in a certain tone of voice by the teacher because they're rude, or they, that kind of, like, it genuinely is like transformational, I think, and I, you know, I love to hear like when people say, "Oh, your son's really polite," and that kind of stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's like genuinely that's what I want.
That
That's what
feels
I
way
want.
better, That feels way better than
Yeah,
your son's real good at
or he's
soccer.
really bright, or he's really clever,
Yeah,
or well, like that,
he
but that
won.
might
He
not
won
be.
that game, that competition.
Yeah, but he's polite. He's or like he was really kind of kind to such and such his brother or sister. Like,
Oh,
right, like that, I'm into that. That's ultimately
that feels
like
good. Yeah, that does.
that's the kind of the parenting goals, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
when I think about Finn, my son, it's the same. It's like, um, I mean, he's only 2, so who knows what's going on. But the thing that gets me most teary, which is like when it's a trait that I see demonstrated in him, is like he's still kind of learning language, but um, when we're reading a book or engaging with a person and the real life character or the character in the book is sad, and it used to be I would say, oh, sad, and he would get all his face would get all sad, and now when he sees like people sad, he goes sad and he gets all, and I'm like, wow, this is like, I mean, he doesn't really, I mean, who knows, I don't have it off the top of my head, the kind of developmental time tracking of the capacity for empathy, but that is the thing
Yeah.
that like I'm like, yes, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like
He's
that just makes
labeling.
me feel
There you go.
yeah,
He's
it's
labeling
fantastic,
emotions
labeling
before his
emotions,
time.
but to be
Yeah.
able to have that sensitivity to what's going on in someone else, that's
Yeah.
an absolute superpower.
And
um
also, like, who said, like, show me the 3-year-old and I'll show you the man? Like, I think
Oh
that was
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I could get into that, man. I feel like I went away from. There was a 3 year old there. There was a 3 year old there. My 3 year old self, and very very different kind of personality to who I was in like high school, late high school, early adulthood.
Yeah.
And I'm moving back in that direction, and um, it's this whole. It's just almost this kind of relationship thing with my mum as well. She was like, "Oh, what happened to my boy?" I was like, "Ah, you're back." So
Yeah.
it's I think I totally agree. I mean, that's part of that. I guess is just the real impact of the early
Yeah.
years, and the
Yeah.
stability of that. But I just had some thoughts, some sort of recommendations for you around like this particular
Cool.
thing that you seem really interested in. That because things that have played a big role in my journey with self compassion. Um, and
Let me
now
take a
I'm
note.
thinking about compassion in general as well. Sort of three things. One
Yeah.
is there's this book. I would mail it to you honestly in the UK, but my sister's got it, I think, called Soul Without Shame, and it's a mindfulness and tools, like it's based, but primarily sort of spiritual mindfulness based model for like how to respond to feelings of shame and emotions that come up in yourself that in a
Love it.
really non-self
Yeah.
analytical way, and then definitely non-violent communication by Marshall
Yeah.
Rosenberg.
I've
I'm
got
gonna
non I've got non-violent communication on audiobook at the
I'm
moment,
gonna
so
recommend
I'm
that to
planning to
everyone
start that.
until I die. Honestly, that's super
Yeah.
powerful.
I was going to actually, with non-violent communication, I was going to suggest to my wife that we read it together and then have little like check-ins about it and stuff like that.
I think
That
that's a
kind of,
cute idea. Me and my wife were just chatting last night about um, reading books together because we used to do that a lot. And
yeah.
it's a great way to become a team.
Do you
Like,
know,
yeah,
as a slight aside as well, like what we used to do, and we've stopped doing it now, and we should do it again. Really, is we would kind of so. I would pick a TV series or a film that I wanted her to watch that I think that she would enjoy, and I had to like sort of explain why I think she'd enjoy it, and then we would watch it, and then she would do the same for me. And honestly, she like the couple of things. It was a really good way to connect because she would be like, "I think you'll really enjoy it because X, Y, and Z," and or like you like this kind of stuff, or these are the things, and it's like a really lovely way of like,
feeling seen, right? For
or,
one,
or like them sort of showing you that they can kind of, especially if you really enjoy it. Like we watched
that's
you ever,
cool, man. Yeah, yeah, that's
have
cool.
you heard of Lonesome Dove, the book,
Nah, never heard of that.
the Western book? They made a TV series of it and she loves it. And she said, "I think you'll really love it." So that was her pick, and I did love it. And it kind of you grow together. But I like this idea of like reading the same book or like picking something that you do together, but you're you're picking it, but you're picking it for a reason that, like you say, that shows that you see them. Or I had this thing. I've been doing this thing for a few years now, where for Christmas I don't buy presents at all for any of my family members. I buy them experiences, so like,
Yeah,
or like even
totally.
not experiences, like,
My sister does
so
that.
I'll just do a little pack for my brother, and it's like a hike that I've picked, and I'll pay for us to go, on the bus, and I'll pay for us to have a pub lunch or whatever. But it's like it's it's time together. Like me and my mum have done like the cinema for like last 4 or 5 years and stuff. Like, and
Different.
genuinely, it's a cliche, but I mean, if I was to say to you, "What did you buy your wife for her birthday 4 years ago?" you probably wouldn't have a clue. And I promise you, I can tell you every one
Oh
of those
man.
experiences I've had with my brother and my dad and my mum
Yeah.
that I've bought for the last 4 years. It's like it genuinely is true. Like, spend your money on experiences, not things. I think that's like the key to like happy money.
Yeah. That was a tangent, but I didn't mind it at all.
No,
I agree.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a tangent. Yeah,
Nah,
yeah,
but it's good because yeah, I don't know, I see the value in that, and my sister does that sometimes, and it is totally different. It's like, yeah, I guess it just shows that. I mean, this is another. I mean, again, this is another conversation, and I think we'll close up the call just now. But that love thing, we're talking about compassion, we're talking about love. It ultimately, it's like valuing the person as an experiencer, and what their experience is,
yeah,
as opposed to your ideas about them, or to what degree and in what way they serve your ends, they're means to your ends, and that experience that experience as a gift is I think it feels so nice to receive and to give, for the reason that it's like saying, like, how you experience life is important to me. I have an understanding of how you experience life, and I want to experience
exactly.
with you, and all of that is
Yeah,
like, that's genuine. That's just so warm,
and
um
also like
yeah.
so I mean, you may be totally different, but for me, like I realized as well. Oh, like it's been a while since I've had a relationship just with me and say my mum.
Mm.
Because usually my mum and dad will come as a package. So, again, like this whole idea of like relationships, that's slightly different when it's your mum and your dad. You go and see your mum and dad, and like actually, it's really nice to have
Oh,
because
that
the
extra attention,
relationship,
eh? Yeah, yeah, that focused
yeah, and
attention. Yeah.
it can take on a different form. Same with my dad, like the relationship that you have just with my dad will be different to the one that I have just with my mum, and will be different to the one I have with one of my friends, you know, and 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 again, it's this idea of like, these groups of people that potentially come as a package, kind of saying to them, hey, I'm giving you, here's a gift of time. Like, me and you are going to go and connect on this thing and spend some time together, and connect on something that's a little bit less than difficult. I mean, me and my wife have said the same. Like, it's really important for her not to see me as dad and me not to see her as mum,
Mm-hmm.
and for us to still be a married couple, and not and see each other that way. I think, and you have to, but it takes effort and it takes time, and that's the thing. It takes time. So I thought, well, for birthdays and Christmas, I will buy them time. It's like
Yeah,
probably no
time and
better thing to
attention.
buy them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, yeah. Well,
Cool.
that's a fine place to round off our conversation. And it's been really good chatting to you. I've
Yeah, good
actually,
mate.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had a great time with this yarn, and yeah, I really enjoyed like teasing apart sort of these building blocks of how do you build new systems for yourself, how do you build a new mode of operating, and trying to do that in a compassionate way, as opposed to a force based exhausting way. um
Yeah.
and whilst I feel like my kind of normal mode of communicating with myself is quite compassionate, I definitely I don't know, I really feel like uh it's a really good timing for me, this idea of doing a favor to your future self, because I'm really leaning into kindness as a thing right now. So applying that to myself, I imagine that'll feel real nice. So I'm gonna give
Honestly,
that a go. Yeah, I'm gonna take that away from
yeah,
this.
honest. I rolled my eyes at it, and honestly, it really, it really does work, or it
Yeah,
seems to work for me.
yeah.
For trivial stuff, particularly, like
Yeah,
just
I
putting
mean,
your
I can
keys
see I
away.
can see it evolving if you keep feeling grateful for your past self. I can see that just gaining momentum. But just
Yeah.
to end the call, I'll ask you, like, what's a key tool, a key idea, or a sentiment, or whatever, that you would sort of, wrapping up the conversation, different things we've talked about, that you really want to leave us with, whether it's a recommendation or like a principle or something, just that you think needs to be heard.
So, self-compassion, I think, for
Yeah.
me,
Okay.
that would be a good one. I think everything we've talked about with kindness, like I'm going to die on the kindness hill. Um,
Dope.
I don't think there's any such thing as being too kind to yourself, to other people. So that is definitely something I think we should all. I think the world would be a much better place if people adopted that principle.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I would, if I would, yep, I would say the same thing. That would be my core takeaway from this. And it's interesting that we got to that from from kind of talking about tools and strategies for managing neurodivergence and tasks and stuff. It just shows the ubiquity of its power, I would say. But yeah, thanks again for an interesting dialogue, good chat.
And
There's
you,
definitely a
mate.
lot. Yeah.
I'm glad it
And I'll
worked this
just,
time.
hey, you're not, what
I'm
was
glad
that?
it worked. I'm glad it worked
Yeah,
this
yeah,
time.
that we managed to chat. Yeah, for real. I was a bit worried there at the start, but we pulled it off.
Yeah, no.
And I'll just say there's definitely more that can be said, that more that can come out of this conversation. In the next 2 weeks, I will try to post this recording to Mindform so that
How did
people
last
can
week go, by the way?
listen.
I haven't watched last week's yet.
Well, yeah, I haven't published it yet, so that's why. But no, it was real
No, I mean
interesting.
I didn't dial in.
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have a
yeah,
chance.
yeah. No, it was good. It was a good chat with Mackerel. We kind of got into all sorts. You'll see.
Nice.
But it was really
Yeah.
around this how minds change, communication, and the structure of belief stuff. But yeah,
he's an interesting debater, isn't he?
he's a great. He was too friendly. He was far more friendly than I thought. I was hoping he'd be like really rip it into me, but
Oh no,
he's
lovely. Yeah, he's lovely.
He's
Definitely
lovely.
Yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, anyone once we've posted this up, anyone can comment or otherwise continue the conversation.
Cool.
Maybe it'd be cool if maybe I will or you can, whatever, we'll see, post something about what we've been saying and get people engaged in the conversation as well, because I want to start talking more about this on Mindform. But otherwise, that's us for this episode of the Mindform podcast. Thank you, Trevor, for coming on. Good chat, mate. Let's catch up.
See you later,
soon,
mate.
Yeah. Bye.
See you later, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io. I hope to see you inside.